literary legends and luminaries. It's Valentine's week here at Booksmart, so I had to do a love book for this week's episode. It's a memoir, How to Stay Married, the most insane love story ever told by Harrison Scott Key. I wanted to read this book around Christmas, but I saved it for another month to time it with Valentine's Day. I found it at Barnes & Noble. I had rewards and they were offering triple punches, so I allowed myself one book at full price. I almost didn't buy this book because the cover looked like a Chuck Klosterman book. Not that I have any issues with Chuck Klosterman, but if I wanted to read a Chuck Klosterman book, I'll read Chuck Klosterman. I don't know if Key's publisher was lazy or they had no creative ideas for the cover. Plus, you can't see the subtitle very well unless you tilt the book a certain way. But the flap inside the book jacket intrigued me. Key's wife was unfaithful, and it's apparently a funny story. Well, that's unusual. I doubt all those people who've been cheated on would think the same thing, but I love to laugh, and I love love stories. And it was hilarious. Key is much funnier than David Sedaris, at least Sedaris' later stuff, because I never read his earlier stuff that was apparently funny. Key doesn't force the funniness or exaggerate like I thought Sedaris did. Key is authentically funny. Let me first start with a kindly reminder that this is a memoir. I don't like to critique authors' experiences, only how they write of those experiences. I realize that a memoir is still a story, and we can be just as disappointed with the plot of a memoir as we are with a plot in a novel. But I think when we are reading a memoir, we realize this on some subconscious level, that there aren't necessarily going to be huge plot twists and cliffhanger endings. It's more about how an author writes of his personal experiences that matter more in a memoir, because who are we to say what we would do in certain circumstances? It's easy to think we would do one thing or another, but really, would we? It's much more difficult when you are living the experience as opposed to watching it and criticizing it from a distance. So my review of the book will have nothing to do with whether I think he should have stayed married or gotten divorced or about any other of the other decisions that he made. With that said, I loved Key the second I saw his dedication. For my biological son, Gary, who cannot read this because he is a dog. No sappy dedication to his wife. No, a book about love is dedicated to his dog, which we find out later on is a bit crazy. Then he includes a note to readers, which is also delightfully hilarious and states that it's his wife's story as well as his. I'm guessing that he stays married at this point, so it's kind of this whole spoiler alert, and well, he does. The beginning of the book is a bit choppy, and the only reason I'm saying that is because as the story unfolds, it's no longer as choppy, at least if Key goes back and forth in time. It's usually in chapter format, not 20 times in the same chapter. It's funny nonetheless and kept me reading. By the end of chapter 2, Lauren, Key's wife, tells him that she wants a divorce because she's in love with someone else. Then chapter 3 is about God. Key is a skeptically religious man, even though he isn't one of those serious, no sense of humor religious people. He approaches the Bible skeptically and is funny with his interpretations of religion and their practices. As the story unfolds even more, we as readers see how much his faith played a part in how he responded to his wife's infidelity, and that faith makes up much of his support system. It's important in the story, but sometimes he spends too much time on this religious aspect, yanking me too far off the path of the story of his cheating wife and the fallout of that. It's all still funny though, but seems like a tangent at times. And then we get to Chad, his wife's boyfriend. His real name isn't Chad, of course, but it's a perfect name choice. And to make matters worse, Key knows Chad. They were neighbors once. Their kids played together. I must read you what Key writes about this Chad. He says, so this is his first time he meets him. And he says, "I'm Harrison." I extended a hand. "I'm Chad." We got to talking, and I learned that he hailed from deep in the Georgia interior and had been living in Savannah a few years now. I wouldn't have called him a redneck exactly, but after more than a decade spinning my wheels in the desperate urbanity of American higher education, where all the Chicagoans in my full count seminar looked at me funny when I told stories about how as a boy I'd sometimes had to kill livestock with a woodworking tool, I found it refreshing to know, just by the sound of his voice, that my new neighbor probably didn't know who Fulcott was. I liked him, or wanted to like him instantly, though as I would learn, there was little else about this man to grab onto. He was vanilla ice cream without the vanilla, a cipher. He appeared intensely ordinary in every way, as if every element of his appearance were designed to make you forget he was even there. His hair was neither blonde nor brown, his build neither heavy nor spry, his manner of dress supremely normcore. Jeans and one of those North Face fleeces they shoot from air cannons at SEC football games, and a face so excessively unremarkable that even now, after 7 years as neighbors and so many moments conjuring his countenance in private that I could imagine melting it with a welding torch, I can scarcely find words sufficient to describe the man's visage. If he went missing and the police asked me to describe him for the APB, I'd have said he's white. He may have eyes and a nose. Sometimes I wonder if in that moment when we stood in my new yard, if God had instructed me to beat this man to death with my shovel to prevent the future betrayal, what would I have done? I would have laughed. Chad did not look capable of destroying a marriage. It had been a lifetime since Willie the horse boy taught me the perils of spiritual blindness, but I had learned nothing. Of course, there was nothing much to see. How could I have known everything that would come to pass between this Chad and my wife? What I didn't know and couldn't see is that underneath the objectively uninteresting facade of this man beat the heart of the world's greatest romantic. The man was a fucking poet of love, and nobody knew but Lauren. He continues this sort of description throughout. Key takes some ownership of his affair as he assesses his own behavior in his marriage. He had checked out, more or less. He writes a hilarious inventory of his own actions in his marriage, that Chad obviously didn't irritate Lauren the way Key did. He spent more time on writing and working so they could pay the bills. They had 3 daughters and Lauren was essentially lonely. Cue Chad, the next door neighbor who takes out the garbage for her. What is neat about this part of the book is that Key is not only funny, but he manages to remain neither a martyr nor a vengeful ass. It's not the other's fault if a spouse cheats or if your spouse is an addict or what have you, but it's neat to see Key taking stock of how he was in the marriage and what part he played in all of this. He doesn't kick Lauren out, but they work on their marriage instead, especially when a friend says, fight for her. It's beautiful how he writes about his friends and family who support him. When he seeks out advice from the church, they even offer to excommunicate Lauren. I can't believe that's still a thing. I thought they only did that to witches. I learn something new every day. Whether or not you agree with Key's action is irrelevant. This is his story, and his writing style is so engaging that it won't matter what you think he should have done. This was one of those books I couldn't wait to keep reading, squeezing in moments throughout my day just for a couple of pages more here or there. Of course, Key wants to kill Chad, but of course he won't actually kill Chad, which he brings up many times, even entitling one chapter as Dateline exclusive. The yard work is rather symbolic, something Key paid for someone else to do and something that Chad did rather well. So Key starts taking care of his lawn. Let me read you his thoughts while he's working on that lawn he despises because he discovers a lot of things as he is doing so. I found the yard work meditative. I wanted to sever Chad's limbs, but settled for the pecans, lopping its lowest branches above the fire pit. With zeal, I sliced the top third off every shrub in the yard, imagining each was Chad's unremarkable head. While I worked outside, Lauren stayed in, where she talked it out with a few friends who'd come over to do a little ice fishing in her heart. I imagined these women sitting in the living room, staring at Lauren while she regarded the floor and said nothing. I was later told someone threw an accent pillow at her in frustration, which pleased me. I knew Lauren needed to feel loved, but I didn't want her feeling good. I wanted guilt to break her in two. I am ashamed to say it now, but that is what I wanted. My wife had done a very bad thing, and I wanted her to pay for it, which perhaps made me no better than Hair Shirt and his imperium of Puritan righteousness. The greatest punishment imaginable, I secretly knew, would be to force her to stay married to me, a forced excommunication from the land of Chad. She probably even resented my working in the yard. You had an affair, and look, here I am mowing the lawn, the world's most helpful martyr. I've been paying others to mow our yard for a few years and enjoyed this luxury. When you trim your own hedges, you learn a lot about your home, and what you learn is that your property is aggressively and continually doing the opposite of what you would prefer. Gutters stop, eaves rot, crabgrass runs riot, feral cats colonize crawl spaces for their fun cat orgies. A mowed lawn on a midsummer's morning is a thing of beauty, but doing it yourself won't let you ignore all that has gone sideways in your little world. Every time I cut my grass, I dream of selling or perhaps torching this home. But now I had a home to save. I could start with the landscaping. He captures well how his wife's affair has changed his perspective and maybe even his definition about home, love, marriage, and life. The book is filled with these fabulous passages that just stop to make you think. Key also does a wonderful job in balancing his descriptions of events and of Lauren. I'm rooting for him, but I'm not anti-Lauren either. Key can't possibly get in his wife's head or tell her story from her point of view, yet I feel sorry for her, but I can't hate her. I'm shaking my head wondering why a middle-aged woman is creating so much chaos in her life, chaos that is destroying her children's lives. Yet I think we've all been there on some level where we make decisions that don't make any sense. I went through two phases of my life like that. One was due to the circumstances happening around me, and the other was due to the circumstances I had created for myself. But now I've reached the point in life where why would you want to add drama and chaos to your life? Life throws enough at us that we don't need to create any more for ourselves. It's just not worth it. Divorce your husband, fine, but the insanity of lying and affairs and moving out and all that, you want to shake some sense into Lauren. Key 2 realizes this and writes this lovely paragraph revealing his frustration and kind of somewhat his acceptance. When I looked at her, I felt sorrow. I would be fine in time. I had a genuine community of friends and family who would carry me through this. The girls would be cared for and loved by our community too, but their grief and pain would unfold over years. Marathon sessions with counselors at best, foolish and angry choices at worst. I felt sorrow, deep and bottomless, for my daughters. Lauren must have believed in some twisted way that they would benefit from this madness somehow, convinced herself that living her truth would free them to live their own. But truth does not make you look like she looked in the passenger seat of the truck. She looked like those characters in horror films who've seen demons. Very powerful. He wants to save his marriage and he thinks he is, but all is not what it appears. I'll let you read for yourself what happens in the story because other tragic things happen. Key realizes that Lauren has created the chaos and that their lives have been in upheaval long before he knew what was happening. I feel for all of them. It's one of those reminders as we interact with strangers in the world around us, we have no idea what other people are going through, so perhaps it's always best to just lead with kindness. We learn things toward the end of the book that happened long before, like the circumstances surrounding their wedding, which I'll let you read that for yourself as well, could have only happened by a miracle. It's that faith that Key holds on to that helps him hang on to Lauren as well. I think it's sweet, even though I'm not the least bit religious. I would use the word soulmates, not faith, but really it's the same thing. Lauren even writes a chapter from her side of the story. I don't know if this is even necessary. I'm nosy, so I loved reading what she had to say, but it kind of detracted a bit from Key's voice. I just don't know if it enhanced his story, even though I know ultimately it is their story. My only criticism of the book, Key glosses over details of the reconciliation at times, yet overdevelops aspect of religion. I think it should be the other way around. I realize he probably isn't going to bear every intimate detail of his marriage, especially those private moments that were getting his marriage back on track. But I think he could have trimmed out some of that religious information, especially the background stuff. The book is just over 300 pages long, which isn't necessarily horribly long for a memoir, but I would have preferred a better balance of information. His humorous descriptions wane a bit as the book progresses too, but I suppose that makes sense as his life gets more and more treacherous. Overall, I'd place How to Stay Married in my top 10 memoirs that I've read over the past 5 years or so. Not quite precious enough to keep, but still in my top 10. We've all been in relationships, and this book will give you some perspective, whether you've cheated or whether your partner has cheated or whether you've never even dealt with it before. It's a good reminder how to be an active participant in a relationship to thwart off problems before they start. And it's funny. We all need to laugh a little bit more than we do. And it's sweet when real love stories end happily, that they're still together. Thanks for watching. My goal at Booksmart is to get a little bit smarter, one book at a time.